Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me today as we continue our weekly discussions based on the book, The Integral Human Being. We are here in chapter 23rd of The Integral Human Being, focusing on the chapter titled Avoidance Coping Mechanism. For those of you who have not been with us before, just briefly, this book, The Integral Human Being, is part of a psychological series or psychology collection, a 16 book series that was written by spiritual author Joanna de Angelis in close collaboration with Divaldo Pereira Franco. It's important for us to know that the output of this series is that Joanna de Angelis really created a strong, very close bridge between Spiritism and depth psychology. We're going to talk a little bit more about it today. And it discusses a number of issues that you and I have, right? Those are usually in the mental health, mental and emotional well-being. If we consider really how vulnerable we are, and not just you and I, but this entire moment of humanity as a whole, we are going through a lot of pain. We have so much suffering. So, this book is what I consider a gift, a gem, and it gives to us the opportunity to discuss perhaps some issues, their root causes, and in some cases, easy peasy solutions. Maybe not so much, but solutions. How do we address those issues? And our focus as we do this study group, if you will, is to bring those weekly topics one at a time so that we can break down the pages of Joanna de Angelis and understand how to achieve perhaps balance, stability, and even our emotional maturity, which is the topic of today, right? Psychological maturity. The books, let's go to the next slide just so we can take a look of the content of the book, right? Forgive me, the book has 40 chapters and it is divided, as you can see on the screen, into 9 parts. We start today on the sixth part of the book, which is called the group of about 4 or 5 chapters. It's about psychological maturity. And today we have a difficult one for me, which is the avoidance coping mechanism. How do they relate to psychological maturity? We will find together. But I'm here to invite you to explore with me the themes that Joanna de Angelis will bring to us, and they are really front and center from those two lenses, a spiritual and a psychological lens toward those discussions. Shall we? So when we look here, we can spend a few moments talking about parenting styles. Yes, being a mother and a father is a wonderful thing, right? And Joanna brings right at the beginning of the chapter this quote that I'm going to read out loud: "The prolonged psychological infancy in most individuals is one of the most serious problems in the area of human behavior." What, Joanna? Let me read it again. The prolonged psychological infancy, meaning ad- adults that are really not mature, right? The prolonged psychological infancy in most individuals is one of the most serious problems in the area of human behavior. So let's think about it, right? What we are, where we are today. And we can see that one common behavior we see today are so called helicopter parents, right? Or, in so many words, over parent. What is it? Well, it's the excessive level of involvement and control. Can you ever imagine that? To put involvement in the same phrase as excessive, is there such a thing as an overabundance of love and care? Well, let's listen. Let's talk about it, right? Because the definition of helicopter parent is just by that excessive level of involvement and control by parents in their children's lives. How and why do they do it? Well, it's out of fear and concern. We live a life that there's harms, right? Or harmful events and external issues can come and really hurt all of us, as well as the fierce competitive society that we are, and I'm talking really about the Western society, where it's so difficult for that young little baby to flourish. So it's out of fear, out of concern that parents are there looking at the child and helping the child grow. Well, the term itself, helicopter parent, is used to describe simply in so many in a few words, over involved parents, right? So like helicopters, they hover close by. And at the first sign of trouble, they boom, swoop down and they help the child. Let's think that maybe this is something that is very contemporary. Well, the term was first coined in 1969. Yes, what, 50 years ago, 70 years ago, in Dr. Haim G. Ginott book, Between Parent and Teenager. So when we reach 30 years later, if you talk about 70s, 80s, and 90s, so 3 decades later, by the early 2000s, that coin term helicopter parent became very, very popular and a really easy way to describe this style of child rearing in the West. Yes, so many years later, we now see a lot of research in the subject that shows some of the negative effects of helicopter parent. But worse than knowing that there are negative impacts, right? Helicopter parenting has now evolved, and it's very difficult to say this, but it has now evolved to the most recently coined terms lawnmower parent or snowplow parent, right? Those are the parenting styles for parents who not only hover, right, but they also mow down or plow away any obstacle in a child's or a teenager's path. And usually, the research tells us that these parents continue this behavior even from afar as their youth enter college. And by college, we talk about young adult, potentially mature individual, right? One of the biggest problems with these types of parenting styles is that a child, a kid, doesn't get a chance to learn how to navigate the world on their own. And the impact, of course, is that negative emotional and mental health repercussions and issues. So let's think about it. When children, because their entire lives, a child, adolescent or teenagers, and then young adults, they become accustomed by having all of their needs, all of their anxieties, frustration being dealt by an external source, right? And they become really used to it, and they become also in an immature way, resolved by that external source, the adults, their parents, their educators, their relatives, their friends, and they become either used to this, or there's a sense of entitlement, right? Come on, I'm getting a problem. Somebody take care of me. Or they are dealt through violence in society, violence in their community, etc. And as the end, as a wrapper to this discussion, this initial discussion, we see that uh, emotionally immature, psychologically immature adults refuse to grow, and because they refuse to grow, I say they, but it's really us, right? Refuse to grow, they avoid responsibilities that are inevitably there for us to pick up. It's part of growing up is to become a responsible adult. So let's think about a couple of scenarios. Scenario number one, of a child of these type of parents. In this scenario, we see now adults extending their childhood as a result of having every whim, every issue, every difficulty easily given resolved to them, right? Given to them and resolved by others for them. In this scenario, is one that I don't know, let's pretend here. Oh, I'm 3, and I now need, because of my 3-year-old peers are having access to a mobile device, so I need mobile devices. Done. Don't think about it. Oh, but I need this, and it's done. It's just keeps on being very easily attained, right? And they say they grow up, this child, and then a teenager, and then a young adult, believing that life is nothing but an opportunity to have, to be amused, to be taken care, and their egocentric stage. So they're very, very egocentric, very self-centered ideation continue despite the fact that they're growing up. Biologically speaking, their identities are shifting from a child to a youth to an adult, and they're barely aware of all of this because it's all about getting their needs taken care. So what do we become as such? Well, spoiled. Yes, we become entitled. We become childish adults, and we feel quite comfortable to have the ability, this voice of authority in our demands to be tended to, and we refuse any attempt to lead us ourselves to a more balanced personality, or a more capable personality, capable to confront any challenges life. The mental image that I see here is one of those, the royalty, right? In 100 years ago, I'm a part of a royalty, and I wake up and there is a staff tending to me, my hair, my teeth, my clothing habits, my every whim is attained, is given to me, and as a result, I don't know if I would be able to know how to brush my hair on my own. And this is an exaggeration, but it's the mental picture that comes to me. A um, a psychologically immature individual as a result of having everything given to us. So self-centered, entitled, and I feel that I am deserving of all the rights and in the world, right? So um, I create often, right? Unconsciously, I go and use any escape coping mechanism to deal with life. Scenario one. Scenario number two is now I am this psychologically immature individual. I did not have anything given to me, ready for me. But as life happens, as we know, life happens and things happen, and I feel somehow wronged by what is either I have to negotiate or something is given to me, but there's that harshness or something is done grudgingly so, or even denied. But I want to. No, 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 you're not going to get that. And as a psychologically immature individual, I feel wronged and I am fixated in accomplishing anything without a sense of perseverance, a sense of fighting. I don't have that resilience to deal with troubles. I just need things to do at the first opportunity. So if I want this, I get this. I don't work toward it. Unfortunately, in both scenarios, one and two, the emotional development of us, psychologically mature individuals, does not really equal to how my physical development, my intellectual development is, right? So it's almost like a incongruity. But we have a third scenario, which is really the worst of it all, I think, my opinion here, because in some exceptional cases, right, the psychologically immature adult may suffer physical and mental health issues that are really difficult to heal. Generally speaking, it just it happens to the best of us, right? Us psychologically mature individuals, it is a common display of being susceptible to being fearful, unstable, jealous. Right? I'm reading a book, an amazing book that is just talking about envy and jealousy from a psychology perspective. It's really a really interesting way to see how does that play into our minds. But regardless of that, this third group of psychologically immature people are really unable to overcome conflicts. So let's delve into this psychological immaturity a little bit further, right? If we go back to the parents, the again, it's the stereotypes of a helicopter, lawnmower, snowplow, father and mother figures. They remain in our emotional activity in our throughout our adult lives on an unconscious level, right? So we are adults now, but we have that mental picture, and it's almost a picture that can terrorize us, right? We immature individuals, we end up unable to do anything, and we may end up keeping a distance from anything, everything that might possibly require, demand us to have a decision on our own, or have a strong connection on our own, or having to deal with confrontation. What happens? We hide behind this theme of the chapter today, which are the escape coping mechanism. We hide to avoid any type of struggle in life. We flee, right? We hide, we flee, from situations that can demand a decision, work, and the word that comes to my mind is really procrastination, right? But we flee, we hide, or we resort to formulaic behaviors like reaching out to those that we consider, oh, so and so is a strong individuals, and somehow we elect them to be our heroes or somehow superior to us, more mature to us to provide the answer to our issues. In doing so, we transfer to them, those that become our idolized individuals, to be the source, the conduit of anything that is to ensure our success. And when we do that, it's important for us to think about it. When we do that, as we do that, and as they become the conduit of our success, this outsourcing to somebody else what we should be doing ourselves, we are mostly unaware of the struggles those idolized, right? Taken as superior, our heroes, those individuals, what they have to go through, right? And that can be our parents, it can be a friend, and they that take on this participatory, this enabling function to our childish behaviors or psychological immaturity. They go through with resignation, they go through sacrifice, and we don't even have the inkling of what that person is going through as they help us. And Joanna, here in this book, she explains that this empathetic view does not come to play in the child adult, this childish adult. So as you can imagine, our personality, right? Conflicts as they grow, and they really become an issue because we are unable to have the moment of reflection or self-awareness. Um, and instead of having empathy for those that are our somehow our lifelines to living life, we instead have this predominance of self compassion. Yes, it's a selfish effort to inviting and receiving this sort of what we could call kindness and assistance of others without the need or even the awareness that it would be appropriate to have some reciprocity to that two-way street, right? And it's not, it's just I am childish. I am like a baby. I need everything done for me on my behalf. And as such, we then believe that we are the center of the universe. We deserve everything because we really have not matured in terms of having feelings of solidarity or or responsibility or duty. They just have not, there's no room for us to mature. Therefore we are in this state of entitlement and this sense of deserving, being meritorious, if you will, being the center of it all. Of course, if you think about it, this belief system and consequent behaviors take place at the expense of us being engaged in the community, of us being useful to others. And it is very interesting because it is, to me, quite a paradox because we are not empathetic, we're not emotionally intelligent, we are unable to perceive the efforts of the others as we demand their help, and we don't see the need of help in the community that we inserted in the ecosystem that we're part of. So the paradox is the fact that if we did engage in the community, we would start to learn, right? And get rid, even if it's slowly, of this impossible sense of entitlement. Right? So this is a plea that Joanna de Angelis gives to us. Let us engage. If for whatever reason, consciously or not, you are this entitled person, get out and do for others. Learn to escape or remove yourself from this sense of entitlement. But there is another paradox that I would like to bring here for us, which is this the fact that the emotionally unstable childish adult, they they're able to love, right? We all love. That's what love is the hallmark of our humanity. But as a childish adult, an immature adult, they love as a means of escape. Yes, they love because they require the support of others rather than providing a sense of companionship, right? So to me, this is quite terrible because this expression of love is an expression of transference of their own responsibilities and preoccupation to the partner. And as we can see, that situation is really unbearable. At some point, it cannot sustain. Another equally terrible, if you will, expression of love for those childish individuals is the expression of love through violence and aggression. Yes, we all know them. And if you can think about it, those are uncontrolled outbursts of anger, uncontrolled outbursts of frustration, very much like a temper tantrum seen typically as a toddler's, right? A young child. And that is just a response mechanism to the denials of what are childish behavior in the immature adult. And again, like that in a relationship of transferring the needs to another is unsustainable, it's unbearable. That type of life really is not sustainable within a social group, right? Because those outbursts of anger is not necessarily into your partner, but it can be with your family, with your neighbors, with your coworkers, etc., etc. So when we behave like these type of individuals, we are dominated by this peculiar type of emotional I can't speak today. My apology. A typical and peculiar emotional insensitivity, and we're insensitive, right? So we use avoidance coping mechanism, and one of them, in this case, is to say withdraw from our environment. We withdraw from interactions because by becoming loners and isolated, we safeguard ourselves against more afflictions, more sources of pain. Does this make sense? I hope it does. So let's continue because now we're moving on to better better part of the topic that Joanna de Angelis brings in this chapter, which is now focusing into psychological health. Joanna, and I put in this slide, read it to you. Joanna says human beings are destined to self realization and they belong to their social environment to promote the latter and grow with it. So when I read that, of course, I think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I just wanted to take a minute to perhaps to recall some really important contributions of Maslow in the field of psychology. So, who was Maslow? Maslow is an American psychologist, right? And he created several decades ago this now very famous, almost iconic hierarchy of needs. And what is the hierarchy of needs? If you for whatever reason you never heard of it, it is a theory that psychological health is based on the idea that we must fulfill our needs in priority. So it's a pyramid, right? You have to do the beginning and then keep going to the point that we can get to the peak of the pyramid. And the peak is self actualization. In the picture here, it's all about being a human, right? Embracing our humanity. But before we can be truly human, you need those hierarchical needs, the most basic ones at the bottom. And when we speak of that, it's important for us to remember that. This is the subject of a humanistic psychology, right? So it is inherent in that approach that, from their perspective, the ultimate goal, the humanistic psychology, the ultimate goal for all of us is to live a life that is we are able to attain personal growth and understanding. And it says, humanist psychology says that it is only through constant self improvement and so my Siri is speaking. I don't know if you could hear. It is only through constant self improvement, self understanding that we can ever truly be happy. Right? That's when we reach at the peak of the pyramid. So it's good to hear that, to see that, to read that, because this approach really aligns with Joanna's messages in this book and suits any of us who are keen on looking and finding and seeing the positive life, the positive side of humanity. And as such, we also believe in the idea of free will. Right? We have the freedom, but we also have the responsibility. But for our reference and our reference only, this approach, the humanistic psychology, is in contrast with Freud's theory of biological determinism. And Freud's approach or theory really focuses on treating the ill person, right? The person who's not well. And the flip side of Freud's biological determinism is the idea that humanistic psychology has the approach to emphasize the positive potential of all of us human beings. I love it. Back to Maslow, if we think about it, his work is then a very important complement to the work that Freud gave to us. So, what did he give it to us? He gave us the sick half of the psychology, and Maslow, with the humanistic psychology, gave us the other healthy half. Does this make sense? I love it. It's one complementing the other. But before we move on, I would like to talk a little bit about the hierarchy of needs proper. Right? We have different labels in this picture. It means the same, but if you study um, the psychological hierarchy of needs, we see that the bottom is the physiological or the need to survive, and goes into living or the safety required, the sense of safety. And then the third level would be attaining love and belonging. The fourth is the idea of getting respect or have a sense of esteem, confidence, achievement, and finally, being a human through self actualization. One interpretation, it's important for us to know, of this Maslow hierarchy of needs is, as we know here, represented by this pyramid, right? With the bottom part much longer and bigger than the smaller, the peak of the pyramid. And it represents the basic needs at the bottom. And while Maslow described those needs in the order, right? The most basic ones, and then as we move on to the next, we can get to the next level, right? Which implies the fact that we would need to be satisfied the lower level before we could even have the ability or energy or maturity to attend to the next level, to the highest need. And we we say, yeah, it's an iconic, it's a hierarchical needs, right? And it does depict the spectrum of human needs, physical needs and psychological needs. It implies that there's this impression that the hierarchy of needs is fixed and rigid and sequential in its progression. And that is not the case, not at all. If you think about it, the first publication of the theory was in 1943, right at that point, Maslow started to already discuss the human needs as fluid, right? And he says that many of the needs are represented at the same time. While I need the ability to survive, I also need the ability to be respected, and so on and so forth. So real quickly, and I'm going to say quickly because you can actually read about this anywhere. It's very easily available to you. But just so we can frame what we're talking about, right? At the bottom are the basic needs or physiological needs of a human being. What are they? Well, I need food, I need water, right? I need to sleep, I need that sense of homeostasis, sex, and excretion. This, if we were to become that, this is what I call almost like a robotic type of life, because once you have these, you survive, but maybe you don't have access to fulfill in other areas. The next level of those needs are safety needs, no longer physiological, but sense of safety. So, what are they? Well, from a safety, it's about security, it's about a sense of order, a sense of stability, right? And these steps are important to the physical survival of the person. So, think about it. Once I have enough nutrition, I have a shelter, I have a sense of safety. I don't have to keep looking for an outburst of, let's say, of violence from a murder or some violence in my neighborhood. Now I'm ready to do more, right? I don't have to spend all my energy just protecting myself on survival. The third level then comes in which is this sense of not just love, but love and belonging. And I love it because this psychological needs is when individuals, you and I, are able to take care of ourselves physically, right? Everything is ready. Now I'm ready to share myself with others. Hint, hint, we've been talking about it until now, right? I am able to get out of my shell, my shell, myself, my focusing on me and survival, and now I can get and look around me and see others, and I can deal and help my family, my friends, etc. And at this point, you see, psychologically speaking, reaching the fourth level, which is achieved when individuals are comfortable with their accomplishments. Right? Um, this is so-called the esteem level, and it demonstrates our competency, often our recognition. That's when you start to achieve a social level, social status of success. We are admired, we are respected, right? And there's this cognitive level where individuals intellectually lead to that, right? They want to be stimulated, they want to explore, they're there in at work, for example, or any areas of let's do it, let's look for the areas to attain, and it's something quite attractive. But after that, Maslow calls this next level an aesthetic level. And in Spiritism in general, and Joanna de Angelis in particular, but I love when we start reading in many different sources that we see that this aesthetic level is our sensitivity, which is the need not only for ourselves, but to promote harmony, order, and beauty. I'd love to talk more about it. I don't know that we have time today, but there is so much we can talk about this next level, which is that removing chaos or disorder from our thinking and from our world. And when we do this, we start to remove the sources of issues that are consequent for behaviors that don't look into their resulting potential negative consequence for our acts. But anyways, at the top of the pyramid, which is self-actualization, right? It happens when we reach a sense of harmony, a sense of understanding and engagement, because we are at that point able to truly tap into our full potential. And I love it. I think it's such a beautiful concept to be able to see, right, all that we have latent in ourselves, potential opportunities that we are capable, but we haven't yet exercised. But but let's go back a little bit, because since we're talking a little bit about Maslow, just for your reference here, um, in the 60s, remember he started this in 1943, so almost 20 years later, he founded with a very famous theorists, psychologists like Stanislav Grof, Viktor Frankl, James Fadiman, and Anthony Suckman, Miles Vick, and Michael Murphy, the the school of thought called now transpersonal psychology, depth psychology. So Maslow, at that point, concluded that his humanistic psychology, the psychology that looks into the health, the psychological health of the individual, was unable to do all that we humans are need to be confronted, right? It's unable to explain, just like Freud's could not explain it all when it was only focusing on the sick individual. The healthy individual is not enough either. There is another aspect of the human experience. So at that point, he started to look at, I don't know, mystical or spiritual state. He called them peak experience. So those are the experience beyond that, the maximum that we get with this self-actualization. There are now the potential for that spiritual experience, the spiritual state. And those experience, Maslow calls the fourth force in psychology, transpersonal psychology, and it's a psychology that has an approach that is concerned with the empirical, scientific study, and it is responsible for, how can I say, implementing or finding anything that can lead us to that spiritual experience in our lives. Joanna de Angelis' writings are exactly that. She provides that bridge between the transpersonal psychology, the depth psychology, and spirituality. She really keeps pushing it further because in all there is this idea of a immortal spirit, right? As a soul that survives physical death, and as such, we can tap really further on our personal unconscious and the collective unconscious from that perspective. But if I may, when we go back to the topic at hand, which is escape mechanism, all right? Joanna here states that difficulties help us with our own development, okay? Difficulties. So we talked about helicopter, snowplow parents that removed the obstacle. And she said, stop that, because as a child deals with their challenges, those difficulties will help the child develop. So, in so many words, whenever we meet some obstacles, we are also encountering some form of stimulation, some challenges. On a just a brief thought that came to my mind right now, oh, this is decades ago. I spent about a year or so um, helping, volunteering in a neonatal unit. So we're talking about premature babies, and they're, oh, the size of my hand. And it was quite an experience, right? You're terrorized. I was terrorized. I was at the time a young adult, right? And I had this life in my hands that anything I did wrong could just eventually kill that the little being. But they asked you to put in your heart, right? Close to your heart. And that was at a minimum, all I needed to do is to let the child listen to your heart. But one of the things that was really that they encouraged us was to actually challenge. So as the baby started to grow, instead of staying in the strict survival with the nourishing, right, through drinking the milk or being petted and clean. There was the question of talking, singing, speaking, looking, challenging as much as possible, to the point that just before they're released, now we're talking about putting all sorts of stimuli for the baby to look and start moving away from themselves into the world. So it's a great memory that I have. I I invite all of you, if you're able to do that. But anyways, think about it, right? We can see that this in this thought process that Joanna brings to us, very much in alignment with Maslow and others. From a psychological perspective, challenges are indeed an integral part of our mental, a healthy mental and emotional structure. Right? Challenges are not only an important, a critical part of who we are, but also of our social groups as a whole. For example, there's an evidence that solidarity in social groups it pops up, it becomes quite clear and seen by all when that social group goes through some sort of struggle. The bigger the struggle, the more we see that solidarity, right? Be it I don't know, when Katrina, in what was it, 2005, 20, almost 20 years ago, when it hit New Orleans, and it left an entire city pretty much without shelter, water, food, anything, right? And we saw solidarity or any other things that are huge. And we see the first thing that happens is people donating blood. They cannot do anything, but they can donate a little bit of blood for the blood bank. They can send a little bit of fund. They can do whatever type of activity to show their solidarity, even from miles and miles and miles away. But what does this mean? That sense of solidarity? Well, let's go away from the notion. But if we think about it, we, right, Joanna, depth psychology, the force fourth in psychology, and we're really moving now into the immortal souls that we are. We have to remember that we have many existence or reincarnations, and if we start to go back to see through the course of this successive incarnations, right? We, of course, we accumulate experiences. We live through many different historical phases, events. We accumulate the issues that we faced in the past, those, of course, that we have been able to overcome. So think about it. Before we are ever born, we already have this huge baggage, and the baggage is filled with everything in our what we call maybe the map, right? The spiritual map of our memories, with everything that we have experienced previously. These experience or essence, as Joanna de Angela calls them, are all really potential, pure uh, potential. It's latent in all of us. And as they work in concert with our current existence, our current set of environmental factors, they promote our spirit to evolve, to develop, to grow. And Joanna de Angelis kind of scolds us. Um, she she invites us to free ourselves from our emotional infancy or psychological immaturity by saying, "Hey, look at all that you have latent in you. Look at all your potentiality. Grow up." She doesn't say it. I'm saying I can see in my mind's eyes her saying that. So she mentions we may have to even seek therapy if unable to break free from those conditioned behaviors, and or a need to get stronger, and even being able to recognize all the opportunities and seize them so that we can fully physically, psychologically, intellectually develop in life. So the question that you may have now is, Marcia, uh, how do we do that? How do you have a recipe to grow psychologically? Well, I don't, but Joanna, according to her, the recipe is quite simple. Start with small, simple decisions, right? And it's one commitment to avoid escape coping mechanism. Avoid procrastination, avoid seeking others, outsourcing to others on your decisions, avoid becoming so isolated that you don't have to deal with conflicts with other people. Be committed to grow. And when we recognize we are consciously or unconsciously, right? When we recognize that somehow we're trying to escape, we should, she says, then face our difficulties and understand that failure, failure, right, is also part of growing. She says we must be aware and really stop that, she says. Stop the nonsense whenever we see ourselves saying, oh, it's not my fault. Oh, I don't know if I should. I'm not used to it. Oh, goodness, nothing works for me. I'm trying, and look at that. She said, stop that. Stop this nonsense. Because she says, and those are my words, they are crutches, right? They are crutches in terms of your thought processes, and they prevent us from attempting or trying, persevering, being resilient in our attempt to deal with crises, with challenges, or anything that is difficult. She says, my words again, success only comes when we try and we try and we try again and again, right, Joanna? But anyways, let's finish this conversation today, because the best part of it all is knowing that psychological maturity comes to all of us. And she mentions to us that learning process, right? Learning is a multi-step process. What do you mean by that? Well, to learn, we need to, well, find information, right? And this is cognitive learning. Pay attention to that information, integrate that information with what we already have in our reservoir of our mental map, right? Store it in our memory and apply it. That's learning in itself. So if we are consolidating any learning, right, we do this through many failed or frustrated attempts at anything. The child, the toddler, when it's he or she is learning to walk, right? First of all, it starts with that rocking in on fours, and then all of a sudden they start to get stronger and move up and plop again. And then even when the child starts to walk, oh my goodness, it's a time for many falls. Thank goodness the center of gravity is so low to the ground, right? But there is, I go up and I fall. I love it. I just saw I love giraffes, right? So I just saw a beautiful video of a giraffe calf being born in a zoo. I think it's in Australia. And the zoo people filmed, and they are not interfering. So the baby, it's 7 feet tall, right? The baby falls 7 feet, like 7 feet. That's 4 times my height. Boom! it comes down onto the floor, and it just and they just keep observing, and they say the expectation is that within 60 minutes it'll be able not only to stand up on its own and find a way to be able to suck and drink milk, right? And it is terrifying, because 40 minutes of try and fall, the baby calf is so young and has never done that before. So anyways, it is about learning through failed attempts, right? Frustrated attempts at anything. And this is why Joanna says it's so important for us to be aware that we will fail, but for us to overcome a challenge, we need to be aware that we must put some effort, and the effort should include a sense of perseverance, a sense of repetition. So I just wanted to say here before we close, how do we feel about the phrase "the hero's journey"? Right, this phrase "the hero's journey" is used in reference to one of my favorite writers, Joseph Campbell, and Joseph Campbell, in his book, talks about the hero's journey. Right, he talks about the adventures of the hero through. Uh, Crises, encounters, whatever that comes at him, but by having the courage to go through that and failing in so many times, it leads that hero, the young person, to the mature person, the changed person, the transformed person, right? In my opinion, it's that iconically, it's the mythical story of David and Goliath, the boy against the giant, right? And having the courage to look at the resources and overcoming the huge challenge that was there. But the question here is, are we ready? Are we ready to take on this journey? Are we ready to face challenges? When, if you think about it, when we're afraid, when we are hesitant, every psychological escape contributes to keep us in this state of fear, apprehension, right? Reality is so daunting that I don't know what to do. I freeze many times. Unfortunately, this state, which is a survival mechanism, right, to freeze, it leads us nowhere. So we are here to tell all of us, you and me, that the more we use those avoidance coping mechanisms, the more afraid we become, the more fearful we are. And every time we look at struggles, they end up being perceived as larger than they are, and will fall further and further into an area of low self-esteem. The good news is that in general, we human beings are quite resourceful. Think of David in the David and Goliath, right, where he got to the sling and a rock, and boom, he was able to conquer the giant Goliath. Let us not delay our challenges any further, because the more we delay, the worse it becomes, and the less motivation to carry on altogether, right? And if we live that life of delaying and moving away, we may lose amazing opportunities for growth, for self discovery, for development of our potentials, our abilities, our talents. And as we develop them, we also find a sense of security, inner realization, self actualization is based on Maslow's pyramid. And Joanna invites us all to put all of our efforts, all of our energies in freeing ourselves from ever using, and it's not easy, I tell you, but to free ourselves from those escape mechanisms. And she says, when we do so, we are in a better position to achieve that emotional balance, that psychological maturity, and we're able to embrace our own humanity, the peak of Maslow hierarchy of needs. In so many words, escape mechanism in psychological behavior are really incongruous to the law of progress, and they are actually our stumbling blocks into a path as an evolved spirit. That's it, my friends. I want to say thank you. I want to leave us with this view of us either as a child, as adult, as both, both heroes of our own path. All right. As we wrap up today's conversation, I want to invite you to read this amazing book. And if you cannot read, just join me. Join me next chapter when we continue now on the second chapter of the sixth part of the book. We're going to talk about the problem of space. The problem of space. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and see you next time. Bye bye.